today's video. Now, what I wanted to cover is how I did a reversing camera in this car. It's a Fiat 2016 model Fiat L, I think, and sort of it's now fitted, but what I wanted to cover is how I got to here. This isn't really a how-to video, but it is certainly acts as a guide if you were thinking of putting a reversing camera in your car, because this is what I learned. Now, first a bit about me. First of all, I did actually used to be an electrician years ago, so I used to do houses, but I never really got into doing cars. So when I actually did the head unit, or I had the head unit done for me, because that's not the standard Fiat head unit, I did ask the installer, who was a audio, car stereo, etc. installer, to also do the reversing camera, which I also bought at the same time. Now, he tried the reversing camera connecting to the back of the head unit, and it didn't work, so he then left it. I think a lot of it was because he wasn't that familiar with Android head units. So we're now a couple of years on, or well, maybe a year and a half, I don't know. I then thought, I'm going to have a go at doing the reversing camera myself, and I actually got it working. And so I'm going to explain how I got it working, how I fixed it, and what I did. Though it's already working, so if you're sort of, even though I might include a few how-to bits in this, I'll sort of go through some of the problems that I had, and hopefully if you're ever doing this you won't make the same ones. But first of all, let's have a look at how it actually does work. So put the car into reverse, and you can then see the display comes up. Those actual lines, you can actually change them within the head unit, and then when you go back to forward, it obviously changes back. Okay, so that works really well. So let's start off with my thinking and how I started off by doing it. Now, my first bit of thinking was to actually fit the camera on the boot lid. And for some reason I also thought that they were the car's reversing lights. I've asked a couple of other people, where do you think the reversing lights are on this car? And they also thought the same thing. In part that's because A, they're clear, B, I'm not looking at the back of the car when I'm reversing, because I'm obviously driving it, and then C, on my previous car, that's where the reversing lights were, part of the rear light cluster. So initially I thought that was where the reversing light was anyway. It actually isn't. It's actually down there. So my thinking was fit the camera first on the boot lid, and then do the wiring afterwards. So I actually took all of this out of here, right, and all these come out by just getting in behind, popping these out and undoing that. Once you've actually got this off, you can then get into this boot area, and you can then run a cable. The problem you're going to have though is that, and I'll call it a gator because it looks vaguely like one, is this here. Right, so what I actually did is I did get behind here. I had a camera on the boot lid, got the cable in. Bear in mind there's a couple of cables that you've got to actually run through here, get it up here, and then finally get it through there. Now that bit there, that has got all the cabling for the boot. It's also got the pipe for the washable, for the rear wash pipe. And when you look at the cabling that you've got to get up there, it's two cables. I'll call one the power lead and one the signal lead. and RFA plugs at the end. So you're not just getting the cable through, you've actually got to get the plug through there. Once you've actually got through there, you've then got to run the cable down here and then run it, if you're going off the reversing light, and get it to there. So I thought, well, that's a long cable run, but that's not a major problem because you can cope with long cable runs. But the problem that you were going to run into was always going to be that bit. How do you get through there? And I spent probably about an hour or more trying to get through there with the cabling, and I couldn't do it. And then something occurred to me. I was doing this totally the wrong way around. I've now decided we're going to put the reversing camera on the bottom of the bumper. It's a hell of a lot easier, like that's on the bottom of the bumper, to then get across to the reversing light, or in fact, strictly speaking, you're not going to the reversing light, you're going to the cable that's on the reversing light, because you don't really want to mess with the light, because next time you change the bulb you don't really want to be messing around with your own cabling. So once I actually figured out why don't I put it down there instead of on the boot lid, everything then suddenly got a lot easier. So the first thing I would probably say is have a think not just about where you're going to put the camera, but also how you're going to run the wiring. And it was a hell of a lot easier down there. There is actually more routes of entry down there. One route of entry, though I didn't use it, I didn't realise it, but there is actually a vent in the boot of the car. So when you slam the boot lid down, it's supposed to be that the pressure doesn't pop the windows or anything else like that. You could actually come in through that vent. I actually didn't though, because there is a place, if you get underneath the car, there's a route where cables are already passing through on a grommet, and I came in with that. So that was the first thing. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. Not only have I realised that it's a lot easier to get a cable from the back of the camera. The camera's got a Y-split tail on the back of the camera, which is like permanently fixed. You need to sort of make note of that, because presumably it's permanent because it makes the whole design a bit more robust and waterproof, but it also means you've got to get the Y-split cable into the car. That is actually a little low for the camera, but I mean it's okay. There's sensors, reverse sensors built into the bumper anyway. So I would have preferred it higher up, but in the end that's a lot easier going from there. So having gone there, we've got the cable going across to the reverse light, but then you're going to hit the next problem, and that is how are you going to get, I'll call it the signal cable, from the rear reverse camera to the front of the car. And this is going to be probably the biggest job that you're going to have to face. In fact, I would even suggest, don't worry about where you're going to put the camera, don't even worry about how you're going to display the image. The thing I would probably look for is how you're going to get a cable from the front of the car to the back of the car. Now I could see three main ways of doing it. One, see if you could come through the roof. I did have a little look, but at the top of the A-pillar there's actually some foam down at the front, plus this car's actually also got a window in the roof, which you'd also have to come around somehow. And I decided that I probably wouldn't be able to get in that way. Other way of doing it is you could go perhaps down the centre of the car and through the centre console, which I have took off before. But the other way of doing it is to then take off this panel here, which actually comes off not too bad. This panel here you don't have to take off, you can fish the wiring behind it, and then after that come round And then after that you can then take this panel here off, and then that then brings your cable into the passenger footwell. And then after that, take the head unit off, or in my case this is what I was going to be displaying it on, and then from sort of lying on the floor and then looking upwards I could see daylight, so I knew I could then run the cable up to the back of the head unit. Right, I want to shoot some footage. I'm not sure if it's going to work okay, but this is for the reversing camera, and what I'm trying to do is tap off some wires in the back of the car. Now I'm reliably informed that the green and black cable goes to the reversing light and the black cable is a negative. So take that out of the way. So if I put the key in the ignition, now at the moment I've not got the key in the ignition, so we'll put the key in. Okay, keys in the ignition. I don't know if you can see that. There, just about. So, and we've got 0, and we've got nothing, and we've got no reversing light. Now, put the car into reverse. Is that in? Okay, that's definitely in reverse. I can get the parking sensors going. We've now got 11.54 volts there. We've got the reversing light on. And if you notice, I've not actually cut through the wires. All I've done is just bared them back a bit, so if I was wrong I could have just wrapped some tape around them and carried on. But that to me is suggesting we're on the right lines. So put it back to neutral, reversing light is off. I'm happy with that. I reckon we've got that right. Okay, part 2. So now I've disconnected the meter, and what I've tried to do is connect the tails of the power supply to the rear camera, but not soldering. All I've done is I've sort of threaded a needle through the copper, so through the wires, and I just want to check, is this going to work before I go to the trouble of soldering. Everything is telling me yes, it should. So first thing to do is turn the ignition on, just check. So we've got nothing on at the moment. Go round to the front, turn the ignition on. Okay, ignition is on. Reversing camera is dead, and reversing light is dead. Then went to reverse. You should at the moment have no signal come up on the head unit. I'm not sure if it's, come on, it's not fully started up yet. Come on, head unit. Yeah, doors are open, I know that. Okay, so put it into reverse. It will say, yeah, no signal. It's not wired into the head unit yet, but still okay there. Made sure that the two wires are not shorting together and they're not connecting to anything. Reversing light is on. Look at you. Actually have the 4 LEDs powered. So you can now go to connecting those wires permanently. And then will be the next step, we'll be running a cable through to the front. Yeah, I've put some sound insulation in the bottom of the Fiat as well. That was just because it was spare. Right, let's do that and see what happens next. So, trying to get the cable to the front of the car. Right, now, we've got various screws that need to be removed. One under there in that area. They are all fairly obvious. Right, once you've got all of them out, you've then got a series of clips. So, clip there. If you get underneath, see that there. That will push into that. So what you're trying to do is you sort of get your finger sort of under here, under this lip, and then pull at about 45 degrees. Probably, maybe straight up, but I found I had it actually at a slight angle. And then from there, you could get pretty much most of this panel off. So, to recap, having tried to put the camera on the boot lid, didn't work. I then put the camera on the bumper, connected into the reverse light cables. Found that when I did actually put the car into reverse, the 4 LEDs on the camera did illuminate, which at least meant, okay, it's being powered. Took the panel off there, loosened this panel off, fished behind it, and then came along the bottom of the passenger door by taking the panel off there, down there, and then coming round to the head unit. There might be other ways that you could do it, but I figured that was the best way of doing it. Now, what I would probably suggest is don't worry about the camera, don't worry about how you're going to display the image on the front of the car, whether it's going to be via a head unit, whether you're going to fit a camera onto the rear view mirror, whether you're going to get a display. It doesn't really matter. The important thing is how you get the cable from the back of the car to the front of the car. Once you've done that, you can then change the camera or change the display at your leisure at some point in the future. The first thing you want to do is just get the cable in, and I suggest probably spending an afternoon wiring the cable forward, and then once you've done that, you can worry about the camera itself and the head unit at a later date. Just leave the cables coiled up somewhere. Now on this, which is an Extron's head unit, if you go to settings, car infotainment, I think it's about device, yes. You've then got a cog there, AA7A, OK, and then that then takes you to a hidden, I say a hidden menu, it's actually detailed in the instructions, but you can then see you've got various controls here. If you go to back car setup, you can then see there it says camera type CVBS. Now there is actually AHD cameras, all sorts of different types. Now I think what happened was that the guy who was doing the fitting of the reverse camera to the head unit, I don't think he realised that you could change the settings. So when it was on its default and he tried it, it didn't work. So he thought the camera wouldn't work with the head unit. I had a look, and then I found if it's on the wrong setting, you get interference, but that at least means a signal is getting there. All you've then got to do is make sure that your head unit understands the signal that's getting through to the head unit. If it's set up wrong, then that's a bit of a problem. So you need to make sure that you get the setting right. But my thinking was, it doesn't even matter if the camera didn't work with the head unit, because the camera itself only costs about £20. So you can buy another camera. It's getting that cable to the front. That's the hard part. One nice thing I did like about this, and you can actually change the display, though I just kept it pretty much on the default, is that where the colour changes from yellow to red, that's probably about the point where I want to stop reversing, because that gives me round about another foot to play with. Now the cable itself, it's also got like a little pigtail on it, like a little extra wire which is meant to be a signal wire. I tried fitting it at both ends because some people say that you should fit it, and then I found it caused lots of errors. I think in my case the head unit is smart enough to figure out that there's a camera fitted and to switch to it without an extra wire. There's like a little pigtail attached to it, a little switch wire that's attached. I didn't need to connect it. It did get connected to, I think it was video input, but I can't remember if it was video in or camera in, or whatever the labelling was. But again, when you've actually got to the point where you're connecting into the back of the head unit, you can try different things to see what works and what doesn't work. And then once I got it to actually work, in fact, if you look on the settings there, you can even see it. There's like a switch where it says camera detect, not detect, camera mirror, normal, F, whatever. But you've got lots of various settings. So I think just having camera detect was probably enough anyway for it to figure out, yes, there's a camera back there. So to sum up, my first thinking was to fit the camera onto the boot lid, as that's near the centre of the car. The problems that I had was trying to get the cables through that gaiter, and then after spending a lot of time and effort trying to do it, probably about over an hour, finally gave up on doing it. Then figured out that the reversing light is actually down there, and the camera would have been far better off being put there in the first place. It's far easier to get into the car from that position. Then how to get the cable forward once you've connected up to the reversing light. I then figured that the best way of doing it was to go down the left hand side of the car, and then finally got to the head unit. And then once I got to the head unit, then I had to go into the settings to then actually make the head unit understand what camera was attached to it. And then once I finally did that, then it was just how far back can I safely reverse, and what graphic do I want on the display, and that was it.